Hello.
Hello, Maura. Hello.
I have been a fan. I hear you on the radio, WBUR. Shout out to Boston's local NPR station. Um, on Wait, Don't Tell Me all the time. So I'm having a fangirl moment. It's wonderful to have you.
Oh, that's so sweet. I just feel the extreme need to say that I am not recording this in my home and I am not responsible for that artwork that you see behind me. For listeners, there's some like dime store art on adorning the walls. I just felt the need, like, please don't judge me for that.
I'm feeling a beachy vibe.
I know. For New York City, it's strange.
Oh, that I would have said you were like in Rhode Island by the ocean. Interesting.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I'm just like I'm at like a friend's house because they're redoing whatever. There was like a pipe explosion. Don't worry about it, folks. Everyone's okay. But there's some floor damage that's being taken care of.
Oh no. Oh God. Okay, but everyone's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, everyone's fine. It's like, yeah, no big deal.
Okay, well, viewers, listeners, I am here with Negin Farsad. I'm so excited. Come on, enter a question or a comment. We will get to it. We'll answer it. Tell us where you're from. Tell us your questions. We're going to be talking today about psychedelic therapy and your what sounds like extremely transformative experience. But I
Yeah.
have to ask first, you sort of referenced this in the beginning of your article that as a comedian, being well adjusted and like on the perfectly sort of Gwyneth level of equilibrium to the universe isn't really a necessary component of your job.
No, it's not.
Like, do you have to keep your edge? Do you have to keep a little bit of the crazy, or is that just a
You
stereotype we
know,
have about comedians?
it's no, I mean, I'll tell you, like, when I was first starting out, I was single, and like that was very useful because I did a lot of material about dating. That stuff goes over really well. There's so many stories, there's so many nightmares, right? But I remember when I got a boyfriend, I was like, oh, I don't want to tell people that I have a boyfriend. Like, they're gonna think I'm happy, and so it took me a long time to realize that like there was still jokes in other types of life. You know what I mean? Like you didn't have to just be a single depressive or whatever to like make comedy. And that like negativity folloes you in every stage of life. It's not just
Well, just wait till you've been
it's not
married
just in
20
dating.
years, right?
Right. Well, yeah, knock on wood. But yeah, so I feel like there is like a little bit of something to comedians that like they chase therapy. I mean, a lot of comedian there right now I feel like is the era of the therapy type 5. Like everyone has 5 minutes on therapy, and I now have like 10 minutes on psychedelic mushroom therapy. Everyone is sort of it's almost like the using therapy to like develop to develop jokes. But
Did you use therapy did you use mental health as a source of content before the trip?
Well, I mean, I had a therapist once for about a year, and it was because of a breakup, and I was just so sad, and I was trying to like get over it, basically, and so I went for the first couple of months, and turns out I was like really good at getting over that relationship because it wasn't good for me. So like, I didn't like after like 2 months, I was like, well, that 8 years, I guess, didn't matter, and then I found that I like stuck around with this guy because I was like kind of like it's like, it was like a little open mic once a week where I would go and I would I would tell a story and see if it would get laughs. And then I was like, I think I'm doing therapy wrong because I'm trying to make this guy laugh, which I'm pretty sure is not the point of therapy. So I ended up actually switching therapists because I felt like that dynamic wasn't going to get any better. And then I did and then I did have better relationships with other therapists where I stopped myself actually when I thought I was going for a joke.
That's so interesting. As a comedian, do you feel like you need to make people laugh in the everyday?
I think I'm constitutionally upbeat and I'm very extroverted. So I don't know that I feel the need as much as I don't see the point in life if we're not all trying to have a good time. You know what I mean? So I think there's something about that that pushes me.
Oh gosh, I think that's marvelous. I'm the opposite. I'm basically a pessimist who thinks the world is going to hell. So, I need to be around people like you.
Right, you and I, yin and yang, yes.
Absolutely. So you wrote this really incredible article, and I really encourage everyone to go read it sorry, that's my cat's tail. In a magazine. You got a gig to go on a psychedelic mushroom imbibing trip. Set this up for us a little bit. Set up how you ended up in Jamaica with 9 perfect strangers ready to take a ton of psychedelic drugs.
So I had not taken any psychedelic drugs before that. In fact, I'm not even generally good at taking drugs. I tried during that breakup that I mentioned, I tried being a pothead. I ended up being really a piss poor pothead because at first I was really oh, I'm gonna roll joints, and I watched the YouTube tutorials and I'm really gonna do it because it helped, because I was I want something to make me stop crying, and it did. But then day one I was this is great, I'm gonna do this again tomorrow. And then the next day I was just I forgot to do it. And then the following day I was oh, I forgot again, and I was do people set alarms? How do you become a successful pothead? I can't seem to get it done. So that just never worked out for me. I don't drink. I don't do, I don't smoke. So I'm just kind of a square when it comes to these things, and a scaredy cat, if you will. I'm just scared of drugs in general. And, there was a time there, I tried, I actually procured mescaline once in college and then ended up selling it at a $1 profit. So I couldn't, I was too scared. So the idea that the editors came to me with this assignment was already kind of hilarious for what a square I am. But they wanted someone who had who wasn't gonna be woo-woo, who wasn't gonna be oh, my spiritual journey, you know what I mean? And a comedian is basically not gonna do that, and I am not I don't love even the term self-care. I don't love the wellness industry. I feel I'm skeptical of all of those things. Mm-hmm. And so that was when I got the assignment, I thought, oh, this is funny. I'm the opposite of the person who might actually be attracted to this kind of thing. But what was immediately kind of soothing to me was that they had a really intense, the place I went to is called Myco Meditations in Jamaica, and mushrooms are illegal in Jamaica, which is why their retreats are held there. And they had an insane intake process. You had to disclose your entire medical history, which made it clear oh, there's medical stuff going on here. There's, and when you get there, there's therapists and nurses as far as the eye can see. So they are very serious about it being a therapeutic experience, backed by science. And that was great for me because I didn't want a shaman. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And I should say on LinkedIn listeners, like I am not here to advocate taking any kind of medication for mental health at all. It is you and your doctor's decision. I know that my listeners are curious about psychedelics. There's a lot of coverage in the business press,
Yeah.
weirdly, about psychedelics. It's like a bit of a thing, both for, I think, good and scary stuff as well. And so I think it's a really relevant conversation actually for leadership today,
Yeah.
which we can talk about a little bit. So you came in as a little bit of a skeptic, but you
Mhm.
went and you said that you were sort of like ready to shake things up a little in your life. What was
Yeah.
what appealed to you? Like what was that about?
It's funny, like we were Nine Perfect Strangers, like the Hulu show. I was the Nicole Kidman character, and there was we were like a really crazy, like, diverse group. There was like a yogi type person, but there was also like, a startup founder tech bro type. There was like the gay pharmacist. There was the Hasidic Jewish dude who was seriously practicing. There was the Muslim comedian. That was me. And so the range of people was really fascinating, and everyone came because of a real issue that made them stuck.
Mm.
And it was interesting because there were like there was especially for the LinkedIn community, interesting, like there was a founder who had been incredibly successful. And that's the other thing, is like you can be incredibly successful but still have these demons that are like haunting you and stopping
Really?
you. I mean, that's the, yeah, like that's like the thing that it's like a thing we all know, but then you see these incredibly successful people like on retreat and you're like, oh, it's cool. You're like super rich and like figured everything out, except for you have not figured everything out, And so it's really
Yeah.
cool and humanizing, I think, to see that. And for me, like I didn't come, a lot of these people had real traumas that they were getting over. This was like a Hail Mary for a lot of these people.
Mm.
For me, it was a gig. But what was really exciting for me was that I did feel like it could shake me up a little bit, just like artistically. You get to a certain point in your work, whatever that work is, where you kind of feel like you're in a rut or you're rut adjacent, and you want to kind of snap out of it, and you want to kind of feel the joy again of the thing that you do. And I did feel like I had sort of stopped feeling the joy of this career that is literally comedy. It should have a ton of joy in it. And so that was one of my aims, was to shake things up for myself.
And
Yeah, I mean, what I think that the thing about like whatever high functioning people is that we're really good at like suppressing things and then operating despite them. But the thing about like suppressing things is that you're still carrying those things around, right? You're still walking around with like those heavy weights, and it is counterproductive. And I was walking around with just like a lot of guilt. I'm a mom. I have to travel a lot. I have to leave my kid a lot. And that makes me feel bad. I think generally moms are just like beset by an inordinate amount of guilt. I had a lot of self-doubt as a comedian. In one of my trips, I actually vomited out this demon, as one does. And they've seen this actually, they see this so many times on retreat that they have like a best practice, which is that like, if you feel like you have a demon that you need to like get out of your body, go ahead and get on your all fours and then theatrically vomit it out like you're like a commedia dell'arte actor, and just get that demon out. And that is exactly what I did. And then after that demon came out, which I believe was self-doubt, I found myself playing on a clay court in the French Open as Serena Williams. So and she's nothing less than a conqueror, right? She is our most incredible athlete,
Athlete. But
globally.
also, can I just play pop chair psychologist here for a
Yeah,
sec?
love it. Yes.
Okay, so you were puking out a fireball of self-doubt. You thought
Mhm.
you were Serena. Serena Williams is famous as an advocate for moms. She was a traumatized mom who had a really difficult childbirth.
Yeah.
This seemed to me a huge theme for you as well.
Yes.
Do you think there was
It's
a
so
connection?
weird. My subconscious made all these connections that I wouldn't have made, right? Because like the Serena Williams thing for me then was that everyone could be Serena Williams, right? Like that we all have this like capacity for greatness. And again, by the way, all of my realizations were very dumb. Like they can all go on a poster with really cute kittens. Like everyone can be Serena Williams. Like you've seen that on a mug, right? It's embarrassing. And those are the realizations that I have because you can see things, you can read things, you can understand things intellectually, but your body doesn't accept them until it accepts them, you know? And this was my body accepting these truths. And I, in my third trip, ended up, like you said, Serena Williams had a really challenging childbirth, and I did as well. It involved just a whatever, like a ton of pain. There were like a lot of medieval torture devices utilized to try and open a cervix that was just really uncooperative. And I also didn't get an epidural for 17 hours. And then after that, the thing lasted 25 hours and there was like a 2-hour C-section. The C-section had complications. So it was altogether an incredibly painful experience. And the therapist had said to me, like, hey, was your child, I had mentioned some things here and there. She said, was your childbirth difficult? And I was like, yes, it was. And she's like, it takes women 4 to 6 years to get to recover from a traumatic childbirth. And I was like, oh, no. I have 15 minutes of stand up on it. So I'm totally fine. Like I got it covered and it's really funny. And she was like, okay, well, just something to keep in mind. But of course, like I find myself in the hospital room during a trip, experiencing that pain all over again. And then advocating for myself where I said, like, can I have the epidural? And the therapist played into the scene saying,
The
like, well, the
therapist
nurse
at
is
the
right
retreat,
here.
we should say.
The therapist, right? The therapist at the retreat, because you're surrounded by therapists and facilitators. And she played into the scene and said, why don't you ask the nurse? She's standing right here. And we basically rewrote this scene this that had plagued me. And it's like you don't know how much something like that is plaguing you until you get rid of it, and then you're like, oh my god, I feel so much lighter because the birth was traumatic. And I was sort of like, it was constantly working under the surface, that trauma.
One of your trips, you took 3 trips. One was seemed to me the journey with guilt. And you
Yeah.
mentioned the guilt you feel as a mom who travels for work. Reading that hit me like a ton of bricks as also a mom who travels
Yeah.
for work. And I never thought about the effect of years and years. At this point, it's 15 years of guilt that I've carried around that until I read your account of purging that guilt and the fact that you saw your mom and you saw your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
As you look back, what effect do you think the guilt and the trauma of birth has had on your career, as you've also had probably an incredibly productive time career-wise since your daughter was born? It's a daughter or a
Yeah,
son?
daughter. Um, uh, I, it's funny because I think you just don't. really, so you don't real like, I think once I had a child, I then instantly felt the continuum of mother and grandmother and the mother before that and the mother before that, and you're like, oh, like this is a continuum of a bunch of women who feel guilty all the time. You know what I mean? It's just like it started in Iran, and I'm bringing that guilt to America. How great! And it's also and it's funny because it's like this continuum of sacrifice, this continuum of the push and the pull between what you want to do with your life versus being a good mother. And my God, it would be great if there was like a solution to this, that we didn't have to all kind of like go through this. But it seems like this is the kind of every mother's fundamental battle internally is, can you be a good mother? Can you have a career? Like in the modern landscape, that is the battle. And I think, look, it's not, I didn't get rid of it entirely, but I think coming out of the trip, the thing that I realized was that the guilt was really making me tired. And one of my like takeaways from that day of crying for like 5 solid hours, I just sobbed.
Wow.
One of my takeaways is like, I would like take my notebook while I was tripping and write in like 55-point font these ridiculous messages to myself. And I wrote down like, everybody deserves a nap. Because like I had just carried so much guilt to the point of just extreme fatigue. And I needed a break from it. I needed to take a nap. And after those 5 hours of sobbing, like a nurse walked me to my room, because you can't really like walk on your own after you've done that many grams of psilocybin. And I looked at myself in the mirror, and my eyes were really puffy. And I was like, oh my God, my eyes they're so puffy. And she said, oh yes, you cried a considerable amount. But I think it was like, that was it was like I got it out, all of the guilt tears. You know what I mean? Enough for several years. I might have to re-up, you know what I mean, in a few years from now, but like I do feel like I got it out. And now I think in the aftermath, what happens after you go do these trips is that your brain enters a period of neuroplasticity for about 6 to 8 weeks, and you can create better neural pathways. So like if the guilt creeps back in, you could just be like, that's not useful, and that's not, and my daughter is going to become a terrific person despite the fact that I'm going to Indianapolis for this show. Like this one show in Indianapolis is not going to ruin her life. But that's how we think, right? As mothers, is like one little thing, it's like, oh, it's the end of the world. And so I tried to kind of like develop those better habits. And I think, a lot of that stuff has stuck, and that's been remarkable.
Wow. What about the whole self-worth thing? Have you been on I assume you've been on stage obviously since the trip, and have you felt a difference?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is, like, a few days after I left the retreat, I had to go perform at Tanglewood in front of 7,000 people. So that's like a big, very big venue in Massachusetts.
That's a tough crowd. I mean,
yeah,
I know that crowd. That's it.
I mean, luckily it was a Wait, Don't Tell Me show. The audience was like, public radio nerds who are like lovely. And so we had a great time. But the crazy thing was, like, as a comedian, I basically, I'm having a conversation with the audience, but at the same time, I'm having a conversation in my head that's like, you suck. Why'd you just say that? That wasn't funny. Like that's basically what generally had been going on in my head. But going to, and I remember at Tanglewood, I did a joke, and then I just listened to other people's jokes. And then it was my turn again to do a joke. And it was the most fun. It was the most fun show because I just wasn't talking to myself. You know what I mean? I was, as they say, in the moment. And and there's something about psilocybin that they found, it suppresses the default mode network, which is that voice in your head that's telling you you're shitty. So to be able to suppress that, I mean, as a comedian, like, that's great.
That's amazing. So the critic just wasn't there.
Yeah. And then the funny thing is, like, so, the critic starts to come back, and then you have to, like, that's when you use your regular therapy tools,
Yep.
where you, like, talk to the critic and you're like, no, thank you. That's not useful, and then you try and build that habit. So that's kind of like how I dealt with it.
Have you ever subscribed to this school of thought that the critic, the doubt, the anxiety keeps you hungry, keeps your edge on in your career?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I'm going into a new, I made 3 feature films before my daughter was born, and then I've taken this kind of like 5-year break, and now I'm going back into it. And, I'm looking at a budget. I'm like talking to my producers. And the thing that has become really clear is that I need to, like, raise more money than I did before, because I can't, it's like there was a bit of pride in me making movies with, like, just the bare minimum of resources, of, like, paying myself on the back end, of, like, pushing my needs to the way end. And I can't do that anymore. I have to, I have a family I have to support. I have an energy level that I need to maintain, and I need more resources. And that's just the reality, and I also, I think, a lot of us who have this kind of, like, punk, like, rebel, I'm going to do it despite all the barriers, that spirit. I think it's hard to be like, oh, I'm going to just do it despite all the barriers, but I'm just going to, like, I'm going to need I'm going to need more resources. Like, it's not, there's no benefit to me in, like, making it as difficult as it was before. So I feel like I'm kind of there. I did have that. I had that for a very long time. And it's because there's, like, that starving artist thing, and you're like, I can do it, with nothing. And I had some incredible successes with that attitude, but then there's, like, you have to graduate from that attitude. And I think, that's what I'm trying to do now, is, like, graduate from that attitude.
I think that's an incredible way to put it. I've never heard it put that way. And I think also you're giving yourself a new level of respect as someone who's older, frankly, right? And at a different stage, especially we women are always told we don't ask for enough. I don't always think it's a gender thing. I think it's like a mindset thing in a way. And you're saying that you're actually shifting your mindset.
Yeah.
To a new level.
Yeah. I think that it's funny, like, you'll have these, like, moments where people, I was, like, talking about trying to get into, like, some social club so that I could use their workspace or whatever. I was like, oh, I don't know if I would get in. And my friend was like, are you serious? You were exactly the kind of person that would get in. And I had this realization of, like, that's weird. I don't see myself as a dumb social club, right? Like, with co-working space. Like, I don't see myself as someone who, like, how ridiculous. I mean, after everything, that I've accomplished, like, I can't believe I don't see myself that way. And so I think it is you just have to, like, recognize that you've done something, and that and that you haven't built a resume in a void.
Right. definitely not. If you can even be the kind of person who gets a film made.
Right. Right.
I mean, let's be honest. One of my favorite quotes from your article is one of the therapists at the retreat who said that taking mushrooms is about getting over your horse, SHIT, so you can move on with life. How did your experience with psychedelics, did it help do that? And how?
It's funny because like like a week after the psychedelics, I remember getting like a call from, a work call about something that wasn't going my way. And normally I would, just be like catatonic and just so sad. And I would cry and I would like have a whole, moment of just depression. And it would take me a day to get out of it or whatever. And in this situation, I got the bad news and I was just like, oh, okay, well, I guess next time. And I just didn't attach anything to it. I think that was my mental, my mental horseshit that like I put too much, you know, I gave too much power to these other people, to these institutions, to these decision makers, like in dictating how I felt.
Mm.
And I think like they just don't. I mean, these are just opportunities, and then there are other ones. Like it's not a big deal, you know what I mean? And so, not to say that like bad news is still going to be bad news, but I do feel like I've just gotten a little bit. Look, entertainment, the business of entertainment is brutal.
Mhm.
It is full of rejection all the time. And so you're going to still have those rejections, but to give so much power to each rejection it's just, I don't want to do that anymore, And I think the mushrooms sort of like help me get over that.
You're blowing my mind right now. You're blowing my mind. I think that there's so many of us out there who, if we could not give power, that it is. I mean, you talk about the ego death a little bit
Mhm.
in your experience of going on trips. Did your relationship with your ego change at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I think that's like if we're talking about like what does a rejection do for a person? It is like it wounds the ego.
Yes.
And I guess the question is like, why does this person who like, or this opportunity of like a television show or whatever it is, why does that specifically wound my ego? Like that television show doesn't know me. Like it's there is something about, I think, not having so much ego wrapped up into your work, that I think can help you actually just work better because you're just not thinking about that.
Mhm.
I have family members, I have a family member in particular, like his ego is so easily bruised. And I just think like, oh man, if he just didn't have ego, like he'd be a much happier person. And so you sort of think like, how much does ego and the wounding of it, what does it do? How much is that affecting you? And is there a way to like not give it so much power? Like,
Mhm.
why do these external sources have so much access to your ego anyway?
Right, and why does
You know what I
the
mean?
guilt have so much, right, all of it.
Yeah.
Wow. I think it's really powerful because, everyone I work with is very career identified, and by
Mhm.
nature, that means that you have a lot of ego, you have a lot of investment, and also you should, right? I mean,
Yeah, sure.
in a
Yeah.
way, that can be what pushes you towards being great, but at some level, it becomes baggage, it becomes distraction from the
Yeah.
work itself.
I have a friend who is just like remarkable at this. And, she had been kind of unceremoniously let go. And I thought, oh, she's going to be from a job, a pretty, impressive position. And I thought she was going to be really upset about it and stuff like that. And she was like, no, like, I think this, I think that eventually this is going to come around in my favor. And and she made it a serious point to keep in good contact, like with the people who had let her go, to be gracious about it. And like now she can literally call on them for other reasons, now she's moved on to other impressive positions. And those people are still in her network. They're not like people who bruised her, they're not people who she doesn't call because there's too much pain attached to it. No, they're just still opportunities. They're still just people that might have opportunities. And it was just like such a interesting, like just rational, simple approach to rejection. I think that is like, and I've seen it be successful. And I just feel like, wow, that's a much better way of thinking about it. Like, well, it didn't work out this time, but we don't know what'll happen in the future with these specific people who are now rejecting me.
Oh my God. I'm taking away so much. Last question is, how did this experience leave you feeling about psychedelic therapy and mental health?
So like, I feel like I'm someone who did therapy. Like I said, I did it for about a year. I felt like I learned a lot, but it didn't like necessarily, it didn't get registered in my bones.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like, a lot of people have described it this way, and I would describe it this way as well, that like doing psychedelics is just sort of like therapy on steroids if you do it in a therapeutic environment. Not if you're like doing a party dose and you're like looking at a tree and like having a conversation with a raccoon. I do that. That sounds fun. But if you are looking for a therapeutic experience, like there's places that you can go, like myco meditations, that like can give you a true therapeutic experience, so that you're guided into like being able to get rid of the muck in your brain. And I feel like, for someone like me, for whom therapy felt like it had run its course, it was a great option. And I don't think it's for everybody, and you can't even do these kinds of mushrooms if you're on SSRI, like certain SSRIs or whatever. Like you have to like clear your system. Like there's all these things that you have to be prepared to do. It's like an actual, you have to really prep for the therapy. But I don't know. I've said a bunch of positive things, and I don't really have anything negative to say, except for the trips themselves were exceptionally difficult. This was not a fun time, right?
Yeah,
like this
no.
was me dealing with like some trauma, dealing with some issues. Like it was difficult. So I would say, like, in the same way that therapy can be difficult. So that I would say, like, I would do it, if I feel like I ever need a tune-up, I would do it again. And when people, like, look, this article came out, I can't tell you the number of people that have, talked to me about it, because I think a lot of people are sort of feeling stuck. And I think there's something about the group experience that also people are yearning for on a macro scale in the country. We want to be around perfect strangers. We want to make connections that we didn't anticipate. We want to be in each other's psychic spaces, and we're not. And so, like, I think before you even try, doing a therapeutic dose of psilocybin, meet your neighbors. That might just do the trick.
Well, and that's why the work you do is important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Negin. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.